And as a result, the U.S. Supreme Court and the United States of America now protect free speech more vigorously than any other country in the world.
Whoa, 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 my friend. Any other country in the world? I think you forget some tiny country on the other end of the pond called the Netherlands. Hello, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Johan, and I'm just the typical Dutchman. And I often wonder, why is there such a big gap in how Europe and the United States understand each other? What is missing in the way that history is taught either in Europe or in the United States that makes this gap possible? Where is it coming from? And to find out, I dive into the US history and the origins to look where are those discrepancies coming from. And if you want to do together with me, learn and make this gap a bit smaller, then like and subscribe. I see a lot of people watching my videos, but not as much actually subscribing to the videos. So it would be nice if you subscribe, because then we can make this gap of understanding between the US and Europe a bit smaller. And today I'm gonna react to the video of the First Amendment. Let's grab it with me. Explained, and 101, the Constitutional 101, I don't know what to expect, but the First Amendment explained, and I already reacted in the last video to the Constitution. And there I already saw a way of understanding between how Europe works and makes politic decisions, and how this works in the US, and why there's a difference. And now I want to dive into what's called the Bill of Rights. And the first right that's in there is, of course, the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. So let's take a look what there is in the First Amendment of the Constitution.
I'm Jeffrey Rosen, and I'm here at the National Constitution Center in front of the First Amendment tablet. Let's talk about why the founders believed that Congress can make no law abridging the freedom of speech, press, religion, assembly, and petition. Well, they had 4 reasons, which have been developed by the Supreme Court over the course of American history. First, freedom of conscience is an unalienable right because people have the right and the duty to think for themselves.
Freedom of conscience is an unalienable right because people have the right and the duty to think for themselves. Yeah. I am who I am because I think who I am and I know who I am. Yeah.
Second, free speech makes our representatives accountable to we the people.
Free speech makes representatives accountable to we the people. Free speech. We can react, yeah, okay.
Third, free speech is necessary for the discovery of truth and the rejection of falsehood. And fourth, free speech allows the public discussion necessary for democratic self-government.
Those are the 4 ground rules. Free speech is necessary for discovery of the truth and rejection of falsehood. With other words, if we cannot say what we think to say, we can never tell the truth to each other, and allows public discussion, because when I disagree with your opinion, then we still will be able to discuss about it, and the truth will come up for democratic self-government. Yeah, okay. Clear.
Remarkably, all 4 of these reasons are clearly and brilliantly expressed in 2 texts that we're going to talk about today. Thomas Jefferson's original draft of his Virginia Bill for Establishing Religious Freedom from 1777 and Justice Brandeis's opinion in Whitney versus California from 1927. Let's begin with Jefferson's bill, which he drafted after returning to Virginia from Philadelphia when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson considered his Religious Freedom Bill among the 3 most important accomplishments of his life, important enough to be inscribed on his tombstone, along with his having drafted the Declaration of Independence and founded the University of Virginia. Under Virginia's colonial religious code at the time, all dissenters were required to support and attend the established Anglican Church. Presbyterians and Baptists could be arrested for practicing their faith or preaching the gospel.
Wait, in those time, freedom of religion was brought to New Amsterdam, the Netherlands, current day New York. The Dutch brought to the United States freedom of religion and expression of that religion. So, back up.
Required to support and attend the established Anglican Church. Presbyterians and Baptists could be arrested.
The British, yeah, okay.
For practicing their faith or preaching the gospel. Quakers and Jews and other dissenters could be denied the freedom to marry or to have custody of their own children. Jefferson proposed not only to disestablish the Anglican Church and remove all criminal punishments for dissent, but also to prohibit all compelled support for religion of any kind. He concluded that because freedom of conscience is a fundamental right, government can regulate overt acts against peace and good order, but it lacks all power to intrude into the field of opinion. Let's review each of Jefferson's 4 reasons. First, freedom of conscience is an unalienable right because people have the right and the duty to think for themselves. Jefferson said, well aware that the opinions and beliefs of men depend not on their own will, but follow involuntarily the evidence proposed to their minds.
Yeah, you look back on your history, your own experiences that you had in life, and that's what make the way you believe or how you see things, what you think is your truth. Yeah.
God hath created the mind free and manifested his supreme will, that free it shall remain by making it altogether insusceptible of restraint. In other
You cannot, we will see.
words, Jefferson argued, freedom of conscience is by definition an unalienable right, one that can't be alienated or surrendered to government, because our opinions are the involuntary result of the evidence contemplated by our reasoning minds.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
We can't give presidents or priests or teachers or fellow citizens the power to think for us, even if we wanted to, because we are endowed by our Creator with the capacity to reason, and therefore we can't help thinking for ourselves. Second, free speech makes our representatives accountable to we the people. In his Religious Freedom Bill, Jefferson emphasized that it's crucial in a democracy for citizens to be able to criticize public officials, because legislators and religious leaders, being themselves fallible and uninspired, as Jefferson said, will always try to impose their own opinions and modes of thinking on others. Jefferson's prediction came to a head in the controversy over the Alien and Sedition Acts in 1798, when the Federalist Congress made it a crime to criticize the Federalist president, John Adams.
Do not criticize the president. It's okay to criticize the vice president, okay.
But not the Republican vice president, Thomas Jefferson. Third, free speech is necessary for the discovery of truth and the rejection of falsehood. Jefferson concludes his Religious Freedom Bill with words expressing his unshakable faith in the power of reason and reasoned deliberation to distinguish truth from error. And the words that he used are inscribed in marble on the Jefferson Memorial in Washington. Truth is great and will prevail if left to herself. She is the proper and sufficient antagonist to error and has nothing to fear from the conflict unless by human interposition, disarmed of her natural weapons, free argument and debate. Fourth, free speech allows the public discussion necessary for democratic self-government. Jefferson believed that in a democracy, all citizens have an equal right and responsibility to exercise their rights of conscience. As he put it in the Virginia Bill, proscribing any citizen as unworthy the public confidence by laying upon him an incapacity of being called to offices of trust and emolument, unless he professes or renounces this or that religious opinion, is depriving him injuriously of those privileges and advantages to which, in common with his fellow citizens, he has a natural right. In 1927,
he's standing in a building that's echoing, and that's to make it even more in his right. Yeah, he's making a powerful speech for the freedom of speech.
In the greatest free speech opinion of the 20th century, Justice Louis Brandeis distilled Jefferson's 4 reasons for protecting free speech into a few inspiring paragraphs. The case was called Whitney versus California, and here we see the first Jewish justice insisting on the right of Anita Whitney, a white woman, to make a speech defending anti-lynching laws, which were designed to protect the life and liberty of African Americans. Whitney made her speech at a Communist Party meeting, and she was convicted under a California law that made it a crime to associate with organizations that advocated doctrines that might lead people to break the law. In 1926, Brandeis had read Jefferson's original draft of the Virginia Bill for establishing religious freedom. And in his Whitney opinion, the following year, Brandeis adopted and refined Jefferson's standard for ensuring that government could only punish overt acts of lawbreaking and not the expression of dangerous opinions. As Brandeis put it in Whitney, fear of serious injury cannot alone justify suppression of free speech in assembly. Men feared witches and burnt women. It is the function of speech to free men from the bondage of irrational fears. To justify suppression of free speech, there must be reasonable ground to fear that serious evil will result if free speech is practiced, and there must be reasonable ground to believe that the danger apprehended is imminent. Brandeis's inspiring test for protecting free speech, namely, government can only ban speech if it's intended to and likely to cause imminent and serious injury, was based on his Jeffersonian faith in the power of what he called free and fearless reasoning to expose falsehood through public discussion. As Brandeis put it,
if I look at this guy, it almost looked like Liam Neeson.
if there be time to expose through discussion the falsehoods and fallacies, to avert the evil by the processes of education, the remedy to be applied is more speech, not enforced silence. Only an emergency can justify repression. Brandeis's test was finally adopted by the Supreme Court in 1969 in the Brandenburg case. And as a result, the US Supreme Court and the United States of America now protect free speech more vigorously than any other country in the world.
Whoa, 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 my friend. Any other country in the world? I think you forget some tiny country on the other end of the pond called the Netherlands. We are really vigorous on our freedom, and that's what we call it, because we don't have the freedom of speech. We have the freedom of expression, and that means also speech, but paintings, banners, websites, video, television, any kind of expression of my opinion is allowed in my freedom to express myself, my freedom of expression. And that's much more than just the freedom to speak something. So now, by the way, it's really not going good in the United States right now with this First Amendment.
Brandeis went on in Whitney to summarize Jefferson's 4 reasons for why government can't make laws designed to restrict free speech. And in the process, Brandeis achieved a kind of constitutional poetry. I'm now going to read Brandeis's central passage. Listen closely for each of Jefferson's 4 reasons. Here we go. Those who won our independence believed that the final end of the state was to make men free to develop their faculties, and that in its government, the deliberative forces should prevail over the arbitrary. They valued liberty both as an end and as a means. They believed liberty to be the secret of happiness and courage to be the secret of liberty. That's a quotation from Pericles' funeral oration. They believed that freedom to think as you will and to speak as you think are means indispensable to the discovery and spread of political truth. That without free speech and assembly, discussion would be futile, that with them, discussion affords ordinarily adequate protection against the dissemination of noxious doctrine, that the greatest threat to freedom is an inert people, that public discussion is a political duty, and that this should be a fundamental principle of the American government. Well, that's the most inspiring paragraph on free speech ever written. But as that paragraph shows, all 4 of Jefferson and Brandeis's reasons for protecting free speech are based in an overwhelming faith in reason itself. The First Amendment is based on that faith, that people will take time to develop their faculties of reason through education and public discussion, that public discussion will be a check on arbitrary and partisan demagogues rather than enabling them, that more speech will lead to the spread of more truth rather than more falsehood, and that people will, in fact, take time for discussion and deliberation rather than making impulsive decisions. All 4 of these founding faiths are being challenged in a polarized age of social media, which is based on a business model of enrage and engage. Twitter and Facebook and other platforms have accelerated public discourse to warp speed, creating virtual versions of the mob. Inflammatory posts based on passion travel farther and faster than arguments based on reason. And rather than encouraging deliberation, mass media can undermine it by creating filter bubbles and echo chambers in which citizens see only those opinions they already embrace. For these reasons, some are calling for America's free speech tradition to be reconsidered or amended. Here at the
The impact of social media. And that social media and outlets, news outlets, who are on the Democrat sides only tell what Democrats want to hear and learn, and the Republicans on the Republican side. Yeah, but the social media, let's say the people who create content creators on YouTube, who make their own decisions and what they do and what they tell about what's happening in the politics. This is also freedom of expression and not only freedom of speech. So it's freedom of speech, but we go just a bit further. I want to know what this is all about.
The National Constitution Center, in front of the First Amendment tablet, we are proud to preserve, protect, and defend the faith in reasoned deliberation that is the foundation of the freedom of conscience protected by the First Amendment, which encompasses the 5 freedoms of speech, press, religion, petition, and assembly. As America's leading platform for nonpartisan constitutional education and debate, we bring together Americans of different perspectives to cultivate their faculties of reason, only by listening to the best arguments on all sides of the constitutional questions at the center of American life can you exercise your right and duty to make up your own mind. Like Jefferson and Brandeis and Frederick Douglass and Ruth Bader Ginsburg and all of these great free speech heroes of American history, we are dedicated to what Jefferson called the illimitable freedom of the human mind. For here, as Jefferson said, we are not afraid to follow truth wherever it may lead, nor to tolerate any error so long as reason is left free to combat it.
Wow! Okay. Clearly, somebody who's an advocate for freedom, First Amendment. I love it. I love it the way he presented himself. But yeah, there are also some. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I will pick up something. I want to show you guys too. What did hit me lately when I saw something from Trump. I will fetch it and bring it to you. Look at this one. I saw it. It's from April 16th this year, that Starmer told UK must repeal hate speech laws to protect the LGBT people or lose Trump deal. The hate speech is something we don't do in Europe. And we certainly do protect the LGBTQ people, of course. Because this is also part of the freedom of expression. And we, in Europe, we are free to tell what we want and what we think, freedom of speech or freedom of expression, until I hurt somebody else. If I say something that it's hurting somebody else's freedoms, then I'm in the wrong. I can't say I love Hitler, for example, not a problem. But if I say all Jews are bad people, then it's not a good way to do so. I'm free to say so, but it's not allowed in that way to hurt somebody like it is in the United States as freedom of speech and our way of thinking and living. So a fundamental difference between the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and our First Amendment in Europe and in the Netherlands, the freedom of expression, until the border is when you hurt somebody else's feelings. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did and you learned something, then press like and subscribe. And subscribe. That would mean the world to me, because we're gonna grow this channel, and that's a good thing for every one of us. Hopefully see you in the next video.